WISC TV now presents For the Record.
One of Wisconsin's most important organizations advocating for children and families has a new name and a new look and a refreshed mission, and we will reintroduce you next on For the Record. Thanks for joining us. I'm Neil Heinen. The Wisconsin Council on Children and Families is a respected, if somewhat confusing, voice for Wisconsin families. In an effort to reduce the confusion and ramp up the public awareness and support, WCCF has been rebranded, and here to talk about the new name and the important work, our Executive Director Ken Taylor and Communication and Development Director Wenona Wolf. Ken, Wenona, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome to For the Record. Now, the confusion is simply, I'll just start with the idea that a lot of people have always thought Wisconsin Council on Children and Families was a state agency, or many people thought.
Right.
It's not. That was part of the motivation, but maybe Ken, just start talking about some history behind this organization and its work.
Right, and it was a lot more than that, but that was a part of the issue that we confronted.
Sure.
But we've been around since 1881. We're the oldest group of our type in the country, and we've had a number of names throughout the course of our history. And that's because one of the keys to our longevity is keeping up with the times and continuing to evolve to address the challenges that we face at the current day, the current time. And so this is another part of that, and we realize that in order to be the best organization we could be and communicate more fully and engage with our communities more fully, that we needed to change our name and reintroduce ourselves, and also introduce ourselves the first time for people that don't know us.
So what is the structure? Is it a nonprofit?
So we're a nonprofit.
Yep.
We're a 501c3 organization,
Yep.
as it's known. And we've always been a research and advocacy organization. So facts matter to us, and that's the basis of the work that we do in order to influence policy and programs and systems for improved outcomes for kids and families all across Wisconsin.
What are some of the issues, Ken, that people might be familiar with that they might not have necessarily attached to WCCF?
Well, one of the things that we've been working on for decades is around early learning and brain development.
Yep.
And so we know how important the first 5 years are, and we've done a lot of work in that. Another thing that we're well known for across the state is our budget work. We're the home of the Wisconsin Budget Project, and so we know that that's a key component to supporting kids and families is what is the public sector's role in that, and that then comes down to money, and so we have to work on the budget. And then another thing that we're well known for across the state is Kids Count. So we're part of the Annie E. Casey Kids Count Network,
Yep.
And that's around tracking child well-being in our state. And then our most recent addition to the work that we do is the Race to Equity Project. And so people here in Dane County are hopefully familiar with the work of the Race to Equity Project that was started in 2012, and we released our first report in 2013. Yeah. And so that's one of the important learnings from that project, which prompted us to continue to move forward on our evolution.
It may be helpful for some of the Madison viewers to remember that one of your predecessors was Ann Arneson.
Right.
And Nan Bryan worked there for a while, both former Madison School Board members. So that emphasis on kids and early learning, I remember 25 years ago,
right,
was really an essential part of the vision for WCCF.
Yeah, and it seems like everyone or many people understand the importance of the first 5 years now.
Yep.
But back when Ann and Nan were talking about child brain development and children's mental health, there was, I was like, what? What is that about? And so now what seems like old hat, that we all know how important the first 5 years are, and a lot of the discussion now about how trauma impacts kids throughout their lives. People know that, but back then people didn't. So one of the things that was a fond part of our history is that we actually the organization, drove around the state in a yellow school bus. Yeah. Called the Better Badger Baby Bus. Yep. In order to really bring that message forward, and that's a indication of the success of this, and not just us, but other people, that's now well known how important the first 5 years are.
Yep.
But before we started doing that work, it wasn't.
Yep. All right, so this is getting a little awkward, this name, Wenona. Help us understand Kids Forward and how you landed on that.
Oh, it was quite a process.
Yeah.
I think we've been working on this for a year and a half, and what we really wanted to capture is sort of this movement forward, state motto forward, and we also just wanted to be sure that we are capturing all of the people that we want to advocate for, which
Sure.
is essentially every child and every family and every community in this state. The beautiful graphic design is supposed to kind of represent these different pieces, these different communities moving together forward.
So was it a hard push to go through such an extensive renaming, rebranding? I mean, it seems like a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we first approached our board, I think immediately people wanted the change. We were due for change. We had, everyone had realized that we were running into so many problems with being confused with the state agency. It was kind of a mouthful. Communication-wise, it was a little of a struggle trying to put the full name in the parentheses. So I think everyone was on board right off the bat. But like anything, it's a process, and there was staff weighing in, board members weighing in. We wanted to talk to community members,
Sure.
partners, just to make sure we were doing things right. And that was, I think, the key of this process was to do it right. So we took our time, and we had a lot of patience, but I think we did it right.
Well, and in keeping with doing it right, you had a big party this past week for people watching the show this week. How'd it go?
It was an amazing event. I thought it went well. We
At the
had,
Majestic Theater in Madison.
Majestic Theater.
Yep.
We had a wonderful turnout, a ton of community members. It was hosted by Karen Lincoln Michelle from Madison Magazine.
Yeah.
We had former First Wave graduates do a spoken hip-hop piece at the end, and then we did the big reveal, and I think it was a hit. So it was a very nice, moving moment for the organization.
Fun?
It was fun.
Yeah, you feel good about it.
Yeah, and it is a combination of honoring, you know, who we are and who we've been over the last 136 years, and knowing that we need to build on that and we need to continue to evolve and continue to change, and this name change is an important part of that.
Well, when we come back, let's talk about the state of kids in Wisconsin, and we'll be back with Ken and Wenona right after this. I'm back with Ken Taylor, the Executive Director of Kids Forward, formerly known as the Wisconsin Council on Children and Families, and Wenona Wolf, who is the Director of Communications and Development at Kids Forward. And this is the last show on which we will say formerly known as Wisconsin Council on Children and Families. But there was a big party this week to launch the new name and the new logo, and to help people understand better, I think, the work that the organization does. And as you mentioned, one of the things that you've done every year is highlight the Annie B. Casey Kids Count, which looks state by state on a number of measures how kids are doing. That and other things that you observe, Ken, just give us a snapshot from your perspective how we're doing on these issues.
Well, overall, the state of well-being of Wisconsin kids is pretty good.
Yep.
And so we tend to be in the top tier of states when we look at these sorts of rankings, like the Annie E. Casey report shows, the Kids Count report shows. And so this year we were number 12 when we looked at the 16 different data indicators about how well kids and families are doing.
Yep.
And so that's about where we are, and it's not so much our actual number ranking, but sort of I think of it in terms of high, middle, low.
Yeah.
And so we tend to be, we're always in the top tier. So that's the good news. The challenge in our state is twofold. One is, are we continuing to invest in kids and families in the way that we did in the past, which led to the high level of well-being that we have, and that's a question. And then the second main issue is, how is that well-being shared or not shared across our communities? And the challenge there is that when we look at the well-being of different races and ethnicities and different geographies, we have very different pictures. And so the overall high level of well-being of Wisconsin kids masks some of the underlying challenges that we have, particularly in communities of color. And so that's one of the big issues that we're working on, and one of the things that is driving kids forward.
Is there, are these issues consistent, urban, rural, north, south? I mean, is that the kind of issues you see?
Yeah, so it's a combination of things. So, and how it manifests itself is different in these different places. So we know, people often ask us, well, is it race or is it poverty?
Right.
And it's both.
Sure.
And those two things are interlinked in our nation and in our state and in every community. And it also varies by place. And so the challenges that we have here in Madison have some similarities to those in Milwaukee and Mauston and Menominee, but they also are very different. So that's something that we're working on, is to really understand, and that's where the engagement part of our dual message around equity and engagement comes from, because we can't work on these equity issues without being engaged with communities who are affected and really learning from them, because they're the experts in their own stories.
So how does this show up in the work of Kids Forward, Ken, in terms of politics, policy, and community engagement? You know, the citizens' involvement in all of this. How do you break that down from your perspective?
Right. So that's one of the challenges that we have, because there are some folks who are very actively engaged and see themselves as strong advocates as part of that system, but too many of us across our state sort of don't want to get engaged, see that system as something that is not a pleasant place to spend time. And so what we're trying to make the case is that it's absolutely essential not only to support and directly serve kids and families in your community, which is essential, but also engage in the larger systems challenges. And individuals' voices are incredibly important to that. And as I said earlier, people are experts in their communities, in their own stories, and that's what our elected and appointed leaders need to hear, not just from people like Wenona and I, although we need to continue to make the case, but we really need community members to tell their stories and not be intimidated by that process.
This has to show up to some degree in the willingness to support the work, Wenona. So from a development perspective, are you hearing from people there's an interest in investing in this work?
Oh yeah, I think there's a really big interest. We have a lot of great supporters in the community and across the state. One thing that I'm hoping with a name like Kids Forward is that we get out into the communities more and we get a little known a little better, and people can begin relating to us and then wanting to invest in us, and see that an investment in kids is really a great investment in all of our futures.
How broad is your focus? Is it individuals, foundations, businesses? I'm sure it's all of the above.
Yes, it's all of the above.
but you know, do you see areas now that you would specifically target to ask for support?
I mean, I think we want to grow our donor list in general. So individuals, we have a really great base here in Madison, but kind of grow that statewide, to Milwaukee, other parts of the state, and also engage other businesses and corporations across the state, I think would be ideal.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I think that's really important, because there's always, for me, there's always a strong moral argument for the work that we do, but there's also a strong economic argument for the work that we do. And so we truly do all do better when we all do better. And so I would argue that it's in our businesses' best interest from an economic standpoint to invest in kids, because we know that they are the future workforce. They are the future consumers. They are the ones that are going to drive our economy forward, and so it really is in everyone's best interest, including the private sector, to invest in kids.
And just again, so that there's no ambiguity here, people can support the work of Kids Forward just simply by contributing to the organization.
No, yeah. So that is a key thing that we need, and the majority of our support comes from foundations, and sometimes their focuses change, and there's no longer good alignment between what a foundation wants and the work that we need to do. And so it's absolutely essential for us to have financial support, but it's also in service to kids and families, so that we can support them better. That's the goal.
Yeah, well, and there are a lot of entry points into this for Kids Forward, and so those organizations, foundations, who now might be more aware of equity issues, this is a real place where Kids Forward is focusing, and we're going to talk about that when we come back on For the Record right after this. This week, the Wisconsin Council on Children and Families became Kids Forward. Executive Director Ken Taylor and Communications and Development Director Wenona Wolf join me and talking about that work. So, as a way of talking about areas of interest that people might see to support, we've all become so much more fluent, I think, on disparities and the need for equity in this state. And to the extent that it starts with kids and families, that's going to be a big part of a continuing part of your work statewide.
Right, and so we're going to be sort of emphasizing and really focusing on applying a racial and ethnic equity lens to all of our work, because we know that there are disparate impacts across every system that we work in. So we work, as we spoke earlier, in early learning. We also work in healthcare. We've been working for many years on juvenile justice issues and child welfare, and we find that there are racial and ethnic equity issues in every one of those systems. And so it's a combination of making sure that we have specific work focused on racial and ethnic equity, and so that's the Race to Equity project here in Dane County, which we're lucky enough to be expanding to some other communities in our state through some support that we've generated, and at the same time making sure that we're thinking about this in every issue that we work on, and because we do see these challenges throughout, and they're all interconnected. So we can't just address an equity issue in the justice system and not understand that the precedents for that are in the education system and are connected with family economic status and health. So all of those things are interconnected, and we need to work in an interconnected way.
Yeah. So talk about community outreach, Wenona and Ken. What's coming up? How will people connect with Kids Forward?
I think one big way to connect with us is just to support the work we do. You can go and make donations anytime online at our new website. And then we also have a really big event coming up in September. We do an annual fundraising event called Step Forward for Kids, and that is going to be hosted on Thursday, September 28th at the Madison Children's Museum. So
all right.
It's sure to be a wonderful night of just entertainment, mingling. We give away scholarships, and then an opportunity for people to come and support our work.
And again, this is for people around the state, anywhere that want to come. Right.
And another thing that we're doing is we're really trying to beef up our engagement capacity within the organization. And so we're well known for our policy analysis, and we have great analysts on our team. And we also need to spend more time in communities to make sure that we're working on the right things, that we're checking our understanding, that we're able to tell the story more effectively. And so really trying to beef up our engagement capacity. We're doing that in a number of different ways. We're creating staff positions that are specific to engagement. And we're all, but it's not just the job of those staff people. It's the job of all of us. And so, and really thinking about this two-way dialogue that is required to do this work. And it's also important that we need to build trust with people who don't necessarily know us or haven't really experienced positive interaction with folks from government or other organizations like ours. And so we know that as an organization, as individuals, we come to this work with a lot of privilege, and so we need to engage with folks in order to do this work effectively.
Yeah, well, it seems to me, though, that you start from a position of strength, because the organization really does, I think, have a pretty positive image out in the community for the work that you've done, especially when people make the connection between that work and the organization.
Right. And one of the things that we found that was really important, particularly as we were working on racial equity, was to really spend the time to engage before we released any information or report. So one of the things that some people may not realize is that before we released the Race to Equity report, we really spent about a year connecting with the community, sharing the data that we had, and listening intently around, well, what does this tell us? Are we gleaning the right learning from this? And what do we need to change? And how do we make the case and tell the story? And so that was a really important learning opportunity for us as an organization, because there's always pressure to get stuff out. Sure. and move forward, and so building in the time and having the capacity and the resource to go out and really listen to community is something that we're building, and we're not there yet, but this is just a step forward.
All this data is available on your website, I'm sure. Ken and Wenona, congratulations on Kids Forward, and we'll have you on again.
Thanks so much,
Thank
Neil.
We're going to be back and wrap up For the Record right after this. My thanks to Ken Taylor and Wenona Wolf from Kids Forward, and you for joining us. We'll see you next week on For the Record.